Back again, you glorious undergraduates. This here is your week 3 lecture on learning in context. So let's get right to it. Let's go. We're going to skip this part for now. You can do these in the bright space if you want to. These are a little bit of something that goes very well with our lecture that we had on different types of learning theories. So feel free to check those out at your own time, but we're not going to spend any time on those today. We're going to talk about where learning takes place today, and that is in context. So, the general principle of what we're going to talk about today is that the effects of stimuli in the immediate environment on behavior and learning. So, thing to remember is that learning takes place in context. It does not take place in a vacuum. It takes place in the context of what's going on around the student. So that could be their social group, their culture, the society they're in. Anything that's environmental counts as your context, right? So, when you think about immediate environment as context, you're in the realm of behavioralism and social learning. But when you're thinking about social interaction as context, that goes along with constructivism and sociocultural theory of learning, which are things that we have discussed in previous lectures. Yeah, we're going to start with the ABCs of behavior. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. A, B, C. So, there's a response, a stimulus, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. All of these things will come into play. So, a stimulus or a reinforcer happens, and then a response is following it, and then that makes that response more likely to happen again, right? So the antecedent is the thing that comes before, right? The setting, the context. The behavior is the B, right? And then C is the consequence. So if we have a certain antecedent situation and stimulus, and then there's a behavior, and then that behavior leads to a certain consequence, then you're likely to have if the consequence is good, you're likely to have that same behavior happen again, basically. So let's talk about different kinds of consequences. A reinforcing consequence is something that increases the behavior or the response, right? So, positive and negative reinforcement have the same effect. They make the response happen again. They make the probability of that response happening again a thing, right? So, reinforcement, making that behavior happen again. A lot of people will get positive and negative reinforcement confused because they think that negative reinforcement means you will never do the behavior again, but that's not true at all. Negative reinforcement also can mean that you will do the behavior again. We'll get into that in a little bit of detail in a second. So a reinforcement increases that behavior. A punishment or a punishing consequence makes it unlikely the behavior will happen again, right? So, for example, we have this lovely person here who has pushed a button and received a cupcake. I like the sound of that. I want to push a button and receive a cupcake. I'm going to keep doing it, right? If I push button and cupcake comes to me, I'm going to keep pushing that button because I love me some cupcakes. However, in the other side of this lovely cartoon, you see the little man has pushed the button and gotten smacked. That is a punishment. It is meant to make sure he does not wish to push that button again. Right? So reinforcement, yay, I'm going to do it again. Punishment, no, I do not ever want to do that behavior again. Right? So this lovely chart here shows you kind of the differences between different positive and negative reinforcements and or punishments, right? So when we talk about something being a positive reinforcement or a positive punishment, because that also exists, sounds like it shouldn't be a thing, but it totally is. A positive reinforcement or a positive punishment is when you give something to the person, right? So if we're doing a reinforcement because we want the person to do it again, then we might give them a gold star. And maybe they like that so much that they say, heck yeah, I'm going to keep doing this desired behavior that you want from me. Like maybe turning in your homework on time. I give you a gold star for it, that's a reinforcement. A positive reinforcement. It's positive because I added something to you. I gave you something. Okay? A negative reinforcement means I have removed something from you. I have taken something away from you. But because it's a reinforcement, I am still trying to get you to do that desired behavior more. Right? So maybe you turn in your homework on time. And as a negative reinforcement, because I want you to keep turning in your homework on time, I'm like, that's great. Here's a homework pass. You don't have to do the next homework. Oh, look at that. I have removed homework from you in order to get you to do the desired behavior. That is a negative reinforcement. Okay, so positive reinforcement, I give you something to make you keep doing the behavior. Negative reinforcement, I take away something to keep you doing the behavior. Hopefully that's so far so good. Now you can also have a negative and a positive punishment. Sounds weird. It's totally a thing. So let's say you didn't turn your homework in on time and I wanted to punish you. If it's a positive punishment, I have to give you something. I add something to you in order to punish you. So maybe I'm like, hey, you didn't turn your homework on time, so now you have extra homework. I have given you homework. I have added you homework in order to make you not do the undesired behavior. I want less of that behavior. The behavior being not turning your homework in on time. Right? So to decrease the likelihood that you will continue turning in your homework late, which is an undesired behavior, I will give you extra homework as a punishment. I do not know how successful that would be, but it's a thing. Right? You can also have a negative punishment. So you don't turn your homework in on time, I will remove something from you. I will take away recess. Don't do that. Trust me, don't do that. Kids need recess. But if I'm giving you a negative punishment, I am removing something from you that you want so that you will stop doing the undesired behavior. Right? So, for punishment, no recess. I have removed your recess in order to get you to stop doing the undesired behavior of turning in your work late. Right? So reinforcement, we want you to do more of the behavior. Punishment, we want you to do less of the behavior. In both cases, positive means we've given you something, and negative means we've taken away something, we've removed something. Stare at this lovely little chart as long as you need to for that to kind of sink in. It's very hard to wrap your mind around at first, for sure. Okay, so this is just a set of examples, right? So if we're doing a positive reinforcement, things you might consider positive reinforcements to make kids do the behavior more are things like giving praise, giving candy, homework passes. Now, a negative reinforcement, if you want kids to still do the thing, would be taking away a homework assignment, taking away a certain number of questions on the next quiz, various things of that nature, right? When it comes to punishment, if you want the student to stop doing the thing, an example of what you might do as a positive punishment would be giving detention. You've given something to them, you've added something to them. And an example of a negative punishment would be taking something away from them, taking away recess, taking away their privilege to be the person who takes notes to the office or, you know, helps pass out the papers if the kid's really into that, right? removing something. It's like, a negative punishment might be to take away a kid's phone when they're having time during your class where they're allowed to use their phone. All kinds of privileges can be removed, and that would be a negative punishment. Okay, so there are different types of reinforcers. We're talking about those things that will make people do the behavior more right now. There are primary reinforcers, secondary reinforcers, and then there are also extrinsic and intrinsic reinforcers. Okay, so we're going to start with intrinsic versus extrinsic. Intrinsic means inside, and extrinsic means outside, which I bet you could have figured out. Okay, so an extrinsic reinforcer comes from the external environment. Usually that means people other than yourself, right? So some examples of extrinsic reinforcers would be things like rewards, pressure to perform, competition, compliance. You just want to do what someone has told you to do. Ego involvement. You want people outside of you to perceive you as a person who does what they're supposed to, or a person who's successful. These are the kinds of things that count as extrinsic reinforcers. Intrinsic reinforcers are things that come from inside the learner themselves, or just are inherent to the task that you're doing. So, examples of intrinsic reinforcers would be, personal interest, enjoyment, satisfaction, autonomy, meaning. They're just things inside of you that make you more likely to do that behavior again. Oh, I did it once and it was fun. Sweet, I'm gonna do it again. Oh, I did it once and it made me feel really accomplished. Great, I'm gonna do it again. That would be an intrinsic reinforcer. Okay, so primary and secondary just means what it means, right? Primary is the main reinforcer, and secondary is the other reinforcer that, isn't the main one, but probably contributes. Okay, so a specific context can often influence a learner's behavior, right? Sometimes the behavior you've learned to do and the cognitive processes in your brain are situated in specific learning environments. All right? So, situated learning and cognition is basically knowledge, behavior, and thinking skills that are used primarily within certain contexts, with little or no use in other contexts. Right? Like, my skills in solving an algebraic equation are probably very helpful to me in the context of a math class or an engineering scenario maybe, but might not be so important to me in the context of making lasagna, right? It's a very wild example, but it's what I've got. Okay, so we sometimes talk about distribution of cognitive load or distributed cognition. That is when you are enhancing your thinking and problem-solving skills, by use of some physical object or some other person, right? So, every time you use a calculator to figure out a math problem, that's you distributing the cognition. You've got something else doing some of the thinking for you, so that the burden of doing that thinking is less, right? That's a way you could do it with a physical object. With people, you may get help from someone who has an ability you don't have, and that would also be distributing cognition. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how learners can co-construct knowledge with others. Sometimes you do that co-construction with someone who's more experienced, who understands a little more than you do. That is sometimes called a mediated learning experience. And sometimes you co-construct knowledge with your peers who have about the same level of understanding and expertise as you do. That would be distributed cognition. Just two big terms. Okay, so it's always important to remember that a learner's culture will affect their behavior, the way they think about things, their beliefs, and their learning, right? So, cultural groups encourage and model certain behaviors and discourage other behaviors. And they also pass along ways of understanding and cognitive tools that enhance what people think about. Certain worldviews come along with how people interpret learning. Those are all things that can get passed from generation to generation. And what we have an issue with sometimes is that there are inconsistencies between the home and the school cultures, which may get in the way sometimes. For example, some cultures teach that it is not respectful for a student to look their teacher in the eye. However, in American school culture, oftentimes students are expected to look their teachers in the eye when they're being spoken to show that they're listening and that they're being respectful, right? So that can be a misunderstanding between the teacher and the student based on someone's home culture. It's just one example of how this may show up. Let's talk about the difference between a culture and an ethnic group real quick. The culture is the behavior and belief that members of a social group have, that they share, that they pass from one generation to another, right? So it's beliefs and actions. An ethnic group are the people who have common historical roots. They may share those values and those beliefs, and they have a sense of belonging and interdependence with each other. Please feel free to click on this lovely link right here if you're looking at the slides and not just watching the video, because it has some interesting stuff in it for you. We will not go over it right now. Okay, when we talk about society and education, what we're really talking about is a large, long-term group that is socially and economically organized, that it has all these collective institutions and activities that go together. A term you're going to hear a lot in education is socioeconomic status. Status, I said. Status. I don't know why I said it that way. Or status, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But let's say socioeconomic status. We often abbreviate that as SES. You'll hear it all the time. That is their social and economic standing in society. We figure this out by looking at a student's family income, their parents' occupation, their parents' occupation/educational level, and there are some other things that go into it, but those first three are really the major things we think about when we're looking at socioeconomic status. And SES, you will find as we go through more topics and as you learn more about educational research and just education in America, affects literally every aspect of a student's learning. Every aspect. Some other terms we need to know. The difference between technology and media. So technology is any human-made application of scientific knowledge for a practical purpose. Media, however, is the means through which people communicate. So that would be TV, books, and music. Can these media make use of technology? Yes. Can they be housed in technology? Yes. But that does not necessarily make them technology. Okay. How academic content domains are different. Every academic discipline, math, art, literature, history, science, etc., comes with its own cognitive tools that help people do thinking and problem solving, right? So different domains may require different thinking processes and different ways of learning, which is why, there might be very different experiences in a math class than there would be in a literature class. It just is what it is. Okay, so not only does the environment influence learners, but learners also influence the environment, right? By their behaviors, by the way they think, their mental processes, by their characteristics, right? We call this reciprocal causation. The environment affects you, and you also affect the environment, right? So typically learners tend to try to find environments that work with their characteristics and behaviors. We call that niche picking or niche picking. Yeah, that's just basically a phenomenon that happens, right? You look for learning environments that work with your personality. Okay, so that's literally everything I have to tell you in this lecture. You should have this week done the UDL module and this lovely lecture right here, as well as read, I believe this was chapter 4, and turn in the reading guide for chapter 4, right? So that should be where we are at this point, right? This part is not really important to you, except that you should actually be preparing for the next, well, for the very first quiz. So let's talk about that just a little bit before we go our separate ways. All right. So let's go and take a quick look at the syllabus, which is under content and overview. We're going to scroll down to the part where there's a schedule, because that's what we need to look at. All right, you guys are in week 3 right now, so you should have done the UDL module. And you should watch this lecture and do reading of chapter 4, and then the reading guide 3 is due. Okay, so next week, week 4, you're going to have your first quiz. That thing is on chapters 1, 2, 4, and the UDL module. So pretty much everything we've talked about up till now. You know, the week starts on 9/23. This quiz will be available to you. We will go and see. I will show you the quiz. Actually, before we do that, remember that also in week 4, you have to do the multiple intelligences module. We will look at both of those right now. Okay, so let's look at the quiz first. All right, here's quiz 1, right? And it is available starting at 7 a.m. on the 24th. And is going to be available to you until midnight on the 24th, as I have it set right now. Actually, I don't love that. Let's say that the quiz is going to be available to you at the beginning of the week. I think more than one day is going to be necessary. My apologies for that. Let's just say that I will open up that quiz at 7 a.m. on Monday, September the 23rd. I will fix that right now. We will edit that right now as we go. I'm sorry I'm making you watch me do this. Okay. We'll even change the due date. So the due date shall be on the 29th, which is a Sunday, at 11:59 p.m. That gives you the whole week to do the quiz whenever it is you want to do it. I will change the availability for you. Okay, so we're actually going to open this thing up on the 23rd at 7 a.m. And it will be available to you until the time it is due, which will be on the 29th at 11:59 p.m. So now you have the whole week, just like you do for lectures and reading guides. Something to remember about the quiz: you have a 60-minute time limit, and it's only going to let you try one time. If you need me to reopen the quiz for you because something went wrong, let me know. Email me, let me know. However, you only have 60 minutes. Now, it's not that long a quiz, really. Oh, look, I'm sort of showing you the questions. There's only like 12 questions. So I don't know that it will take you the whole 60 minutes. I hope it doesn't. If you are a person who requires extra time, then I will go in individually and change your timing for each student. If I can do that. I'm not sure I can do that. If not, and it cuts you off and you need more time, I'll be happy to reopen the quiz for you. Okay, so that is one of the things you're doing next week. Quiz, quiz, quiz. Oh no, I don't want to discard the changes. Thank you. I should hit save. Otherwise, that will be bad. And then the other thing if you'll recall, back to the syllabus, back to the schedule. Is the UDL module, right? But then next week is the multiple intelligences module. So, show you a little bit about that. It's under lecture 6 at the moment. Click on that. You're gonna find a whole thing. It's not really a module. It's more of a lecture, basically. So I will be kind of walking you through multiple intelligences. I will make a video on that. We'll talk about it. Right, here's part of what you'll see. There'll be a little text to read. And then, of course, the dates are wrong on this, but then, of course, I'll do a lecture, just like always. So that's what's happening next week. Quiz, and also a lecture, / a bit of reading on the topic of multiple intelligences. Yes, that does mean you don't have a reading guide due that next week. I know, right? You do get a tiny little break from the reading guides, so I think that'll be nice for us. Alright, I'm looking forward to very soon getting to grade some of your reading guides. I think this is going to be really cool to see what you guys had to think about all the things in the book. This video has gone on for a long time, so this might be a good time for me to sign off. Hope you're doing well, and please do let me know if you require any assistance. Peace, everybody.